And welcome to our virtual town hall meeting with our sheriff, Mr. Ron Freeman. My name is Carter Patterson, chairman of the Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce. It's my pleasure to moderate today's town hall. Also joining us today will be our county's emergency management director, Mr. Chris Grimes. We will be asking questions pre-submitted to both of them. But if you have additional questions, please email them to James McCoy at his email address, jmccoy@focochamber.org. The Chamber has been receiving numerous calls from business owners with questions regarding the governor's shelter-in-place order he announced last Wednesday. So we reached out to the sheriff to help explain what shelter-in-place means. For most people in our county, Sheriff Freeman needs no introduction, but I will point out that he has 30 years of experience in law enforcement, holds a master's in public administration, graduated from the Georgia Law Enforcement Fan College and the FBI Press. Chris Grimes was named Emergency Management Director in 2018, holds a bachelor's degree from the University of North Georgia, and has a master's in Public Safety Administration from Columbus State University. I know both of you have been working long hours. I'm going to ask each of you to give a statement before asking some of our questions received from our participants. Sheriff, you can go first.
Thank you, Carter, and welcome everybody. And first and foremost, let me say thank you on behalf of all the men and women of the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. Forsyth County and our business community has came aboard like, I hate to say this, but like we expect, because it's become so commonplace in Forsyth County. The support we have gotten and the first responders in Forsyth County have gotten has been nothing short of incredible, from donations of masks and hand sanitizers to vitamin drinks to food being brought to the first responders. It's been incredible. And it's not lost on us what's happening in our community and the challenges that this is causing, the challenges it's causing our business community. And so I hope that you understand we're very clear. We need our businesses to succeed. We need you to be viable. We need you to do those things. And so safety has to be first and foremost. Saving lives and keeping people safe has to be our number one priority. But following closely behind that, if we can accomplish that goal, becomes our goal of making sure that our business community survives and thrives to the best that they can during this time. So I hope you understand my focus as we go through this and answer some questions. Safety and saving lives is number one. Number two is we understand the challenges that this causes business, and we're going to do everything we can to support that and do those things. Look, whether you are, I've had people cuss at me, and I've had people thank me, and I've had people yell at me for not doing enough, and I've had people tell me that I'm trouncing on constitutional rights. So it's the gamut. Most are saying thank you to our first responders for what they're doing. So in a rambling way of saying this, look, no matter where you lay on the side of this, whether you believe that there's been some overreaction or you believe that this is worse than what you're hearing, or you believe that we're on the right track, the faster we all work together in the shelter in place is the faster we reopen Georgia and the faster we reopen Forsyth County and get back to our American way of life. So understand as we go through these questions and do these things, that's our focus, that's our goal and where we stand. But we need to keep working together because there is some room to improve in what I saw this weekend, although I did see a lot of people doing great things, and we're very appreciative of that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris, and then we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Hey, Chris, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I just want to say, echo what the sheriff said, and we have some great businesses, great folks that have reached out to us and been very supportive of public safety, from sheriff's office, fire department, my staff in 911 and EMA. You've been wonderful, and so thank you. And know that the decisions we've been making over the past few weeks, we don't take those decisions lightly, and we are working. I know the sheriff and I have talked many times late at night and but we are trying to keep the best interest for both businesses, community members, everybody at the forefront of our minds, whether it be other elected officials, commissioners. Know that all of us are doing the best we can with the information that we have to keep you safe.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again both for joining us, and we'll just get right into the questions and keep this moving along. We know that you both have very busy days ahead. So the first question is, are folks complying with the executive order?
So I'll start. It is a loaded question. Of course, a lot of people are. If you are out and about, I had some people calling me all weekend telling me that at Home Depot, at Lowe's, as an example, that there were more people than normal on a weekend. Well, that's not accurate. There weren't. I know because I went out and rode around. I went and looked at those stores. I drove around all weekend pretty much to see for myself what was going on. And so several of those stores are doing exactly what this executive order requires. So whether you're critical infrastructure, and Chris and I will go into this in a minute, or your non-critical infrastructure, there are some requirements that you have to do for your business to be in compliance with this executive order. That being said, I also went to a lot of boat ramps, and I went to some places that, clearly there were some people not. We had a group having a party. We had some neighborhood cul-de-sacs, which is, I get, we're social animals, where people were trying to sit apart, but inevitably it ended up with 30 or 40 people and they weren't 6 foot apart. They weren't doing these things. And so we had to go have conversations with them. So yeah, we're probably 70% compliant, but if we can get to 90% compliance, then you know what, we get through this faster. We open our businesses back up and we get back to our way of life. So we got a little ways to go.
Very good. Very good. Next question. Can ice cream and food trucks continue to go to neighborhoods and offer curbside delivery?
Chris, take that one.
So the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. Now, people know this food trucks, obviously we need you to practice good social distancing when you're there. And, if you're waiting to order, having marks on the ground for 6 feet, between people as they wait to order. But that is considered to be just like takeout, carry out food service would be. Now, I will say to the food truck operators, as far as from an environmental health perspective and your licensing, what has to be done, especially if you have received your permit from another county to notify Forsyth County Environmental Health. But those are things that should be done whether we were in the middle of COVID-19 response or not. So just continue to follow what you would normally do.
Okay, sounds good. I know a lot of neighborhoods have been having organizing food trucks to come into their neighborhood.
Mine did Friday night.
Once of normal.
Yeah, mine did Friday night, but it was done very safe. There was every 6 feet there was an X on the ground where people could stand and wait to order. So practice good social distancing. We don't need a whole bunch of people there at a time, but a few people stand in line 6 feet apart. Please do it responsibly.
Right.
So Carter, if I can take a second to kind of go over some specifics on this executive order that I think, particularly for our business owners, need to understand this, because this is clearly, which carries it carries the status of law, if you will. The executive order does. It has enforcement power with it. But if you are a critical infrastructure, which food delivery would be part of, and you can go on the CISA, you can go on the Department of Homeland Security, and you can find out whether you are and we'll talk about that a little bit more, whether you are a critical infrastructure or not. But it requires 16 different things that you do. And I'm not going to go into every one of them, but just some of them. You have to screen your employees. If they appear to be sick, you have to even take their temperature. I know there may be a question of whether you can legally take an employee's temperature. The executive order gives you that right to do that. If it's greater than 100.4, then you need to consider isolating that employee and sending them home for quarantine, and certainly to send them to their medical professional. You have to enhance sanitation of the workplace, require hand washing. Gee, I hope we're all doing that to begin with. you have to provide as available personal protective equipment. And this, again, if you're critical infrastructure, okay? If employees are taking breaks or lunches, you've got to make sure that they're separated. You've got to make sure they're not congregating and together. You're directed to try to do teleworking if you can, stagger shifts, as we're doing right now, do virtual town halls, do virtual meetings, virtual conferences, not having employees share workstations. You have to provide disinfectant sanitation products. You have to prohibit handshaking and close contact. And just doing those things even goes into suspending the use of pen pads if you can, if you have the capacity of doing that, working with your provider, that you're supposed to get rid of that if you can. And I know that some can't. That's just on critical infrastructure. If you're a non-critical business, and I'll wait for that, but there's a lot of, I think, misconception on what the actual executive order says as far as when it talks about minimum basic operations and things like that. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about those, what that means for the non-critical infrastructure things.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next question from an employer. Do my employees, as well as employers of essential businesses, need a letter when they travel for business?
Okay. Chris can chime in on this afterwards, but I think I said it best when I said, last I checked, we still live in America. And we don't ask for papers. That was a long time ago in a really bad place. So look, you are required by law to do only necessary travel, and essential travel is the actual term. Do those things and comply with what this executive order says. That being said, nobody in Forsyth County Sheriff's Office is going to be pulling somebody over, driving down the road, unless there is a legal reason to pull you over, like you're speeding or you're weaving or you're doing something else that's illegal that we're going to do. And they may ask the question of where you're going and what you're out for in relation to the speeding traffic stop that they do. But we're not going to have checkpoints. We're not going to be randomly pulling people over to ask you what you're doing out and about. This is America. You have a constitutional right to do certain things. The executive order does carry the weight of law, and it requires essential travel, but it does not give us the legal authority to randomly pull over citizens. That being said, your employees do not need a letter to decide to declare that they are in home, that they're part of the critical infrastructure under Homeland Security and the CISA guidelines. A lot of agencies and organizations are given those. If it makes your employees feel better, yes, you can do that. I'm never going to ask for one. None of my people are going to ask for one. Not at this point of where we're at. We are not there, and it's not going to happen under the government authorities of Forsyth County or the state of Georgia. Even Governor Kemp, in his commonly asked questions when he signed the executive order, said you do not need a letter to travel in the state of Georgia. Kind of the same thing.
Well, that's super. I've heard reports that up in other areas of Vermont, you might need a letter, but I'm glad you're taking that approach. And I'm going to skip some. I know that some of these questions I'm going to bounce around a little bit here as you answer questions, and some of the questions have been pre-submitted or getting answered by your answers. But I think I'll just go right into this one. People have been asking about curfews. Is there a curfew in place? Or if things get worse, could we start seeing a curfew and or roadblock?
Chris, you can start if you like.
So I'll say on the curfew right now, there is no curfew in place. And we do know there were some communities have gone that went to that. But since the governor's executive order came out, I believe all those have been taken back, and there's nothing in Forsyth County. One thing the governor's order did is basically said all the counties that had taken actions that would conflict with the governor's executive order, so that they had already done their own shelter-in-place orders or curfews, that if it conflicted, that those were, lack of a better term, null and void. So it did put basically the entire state on the same page.
Okay.
So to answer that, under Title 38 of Georgia law, which is where you'll find the executive powers and an emergency order, which is a kind of obscure section that we don't usually look at a whole lot. the governor could take an additional step and could create a curfew. He has that authority to do that under an executive order and the approval of the legislature that it's already been given to him. But at this point, I've heard no discussion in speaking with Lieutenant Governor's office or the governor's office of a curfew. You can't say it could never happen because it's legal under that title of the law, but I've heard nothing out of their offices to indicate that we're headed that way.
Fantastic. Now, this next question I think you answered earlier, Sheriff, but I'll just let you and Chris elaborate a little bit. But one business owner wants to know, is it legally acceptable to take the temperature of essential employees who come to the office?
Chris?
So one thing like the sheriff said earlier, in the governor's executive order, that if you are going to have employees there, that it does say you have to keep them safe by doing certain things, and one is ensuring that they do not have over 100.4 temperature. So as far as legal, I think the governor's executive order gives you that authority to be able to do that. But if you have any further questions, I would recommend that you reach out to your legal counsel and make sure that they have read and understand the governor's executive order, not just what happens on a day-to-day basis, but really what does the governor's executive order mean for that business.
Okay. Next question. Is your office enforcing the no visitors at home unless it is for one of the exceptions listed?
So the executive order does specifically spell out essential travel and visit, things like that. And as simply as, and as horrible as it sounds, the order does say that you're not supposed to just randomly go over to your buddy's house and, well, there's no sports on right now, so maybe there's less of that going on. But you're not supposed to just randomly go over unless you are performing an essential function. If you're delivering food, you're delivering medicine, you're checking on the elderly, you're doing those kind of things. Those are essential functions that are approved and allowed. Hanging out right now is not approved and allowed. And that's a challenge that we're seeing in some of the subdivisions, less in business because that's not a business really related question. But the problem that we have in that is it's difficult to enforce because it's just like anything else. If I see 5 people standing in a driveway as one of my black and white sheriff's cars are traveling by, number one, we don't know whether they live in the same household or not. And 2, we are really trying, and I think every sheriff in the state of Georgia and kind of some guidance from the governor's office as well as from all of us talking together, sheriffs, are really trying to take this because we need to remember, number one, we got to save lives. We've got to keep people safe. Number 2, we're talking about our own citizens who are good people, who are not criminals, who are not intentionally committing a criminal act. I have people who want me to go arrest everybody who's within 6 foot of somebody. And that is a very, very small portion of the people in Forsyth County that want that to happen. But we have to remember who we're dealing with and for what purpose. And this is new and tough for all of us. I mean, you look at the impact it's having on our business, look at the impact it has on our social lives and those types of things. So we are really working hard on having conversations with people to gain compliance. And you know what? 99.5%, 99.9% of the time, we're able to gain that compliance and get people to do those things. Would I ever rule out completely that we would take enforcement action? Absolutely not. If somebody pushes the envelope, if somebody endangers our community, if somebody told me they were going to have a huge party and they didn't care what the executive order said, they do those things, we'll go have a conversation. But we're going to protect our community first and foremost, while making sure that we also protect your constitutional rights. So I think I heard a little bit, well, the sheriff's office or the state patrol who originally sheriffs had no authority under this to begin with. It was only the Department of Public Safety. At the end of the week, the governor granted sheriffs. Police departments don't have authority to enforce this, but he granted sheriffs across the state the authority to help enforce this. That being said, if somebody pushes the envelope, we want voluntary compliance. We want to be able to get through this together as Forsyth County. But if you push the envelope, don't believe that we will not enforce this by citation and or potentially arrest if we had to.
All right. Well, here's more of a lighthearted question. Is it okay to go camping? Chris, you want to take that?
That is,
So,
go ahead.
Most of the federal, state, local campgrounds have closed. So I will say, finding somewhere to go may be a little more challenging. And the thing with camping that's challenging is depending on what type of camping you're talking about. Tent camping that you're going to be sharing a community bathroom, shower rooms, those kind of things, that's going to get a little more tricky. Whereas if you've got an all self-contained RV, I think the more difficult thing is probably going to be finding somewhere to go.
I guess technically by the letter of that, traveling, if you're not doing to go exercise, if you're just going, I get this, can we just go right around the mountains? Technically by the word of the executive order, that is not essential travel. Sightseeing is not essential travel. Technically camping, as I read it, would not be essential travel. Although if you, granted, if you had a place where, as Director Grimes just said, where you weren't sharing bathhouses, you weren't doing that, you had your own property, can I go to my deer camp and stay in my camper? Of course you can. Those types of things. But again, the whole idea right now is to, regardless of the order, is to avoid unnecessary travel, to avoid unnecessary contact, flatten this curve out, and get us back open and back to our way of life. That's what I talked about in the beginning, being a good neighbor, being a good citizen. No one's trying to take away your rights. No one has an interest in doing that, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. But this is where we all have to come together.
It is, and it's a short term. We hope that people follow, that they social distance, they do the things they're supposed to. That really this is short term. That we're looking. We hope that we can get. Trust me, I have a sheriff knows I have an 8-year-old and 5-year-old, both boys, and trust me, they're ready to get out of the house too. So just know, but we're all in this together, and that's we all have got to do what we can get Forsyth County, the state of Georgia, the United States back up and going.
Fantastic. We just received an email from an attendee asking this question. If your business falls in a gray area, what is the process of receiving essential status so to not be forced to close? Chris,
Okay.
That would probably be you.
Sorry, Carter, you broke up there at the very end.
Yeah, how does a business know if they're essential? And what if they fall in the gray area?
So there's two ways to know. One is you can go read on the county website. We've got it posted from the Department of Homeland Security, CISA agency, and it goes through all the different essential categories. Also on the Georgia Department of Economic Development website, they have posted a pretty good amount of information on there. And even in the governor's executive order, set of businesses had questions, so like that the Georgia Department of Economic Development would be the go-to for them.
Okay.
So Carter,
Yeah.
I think this is important at this point and I don't think we've talked about it yet. If you're a non-critical business, do we have to shut down? Well, there's 19 businesses that had to shut their doors. Okay, and those were bars, nightclubs, gyms, fitness centers, bowling alleys, theaters, live performance venues, amusement parks, dine-in at restaurants, estheticians, hair designers, body art studios, beauty shop salons, barber shops, schools related to esthetician or cosmetology and hair design, massage therapy, nail care. Those are required straight up to close. Now, this is where I think it's important for chamber members to understand. The governor's order allows what they refer to as minimum basic operations. That doesn't mean you can't go. You can't do payroll. It doesn't mean you can't go in and open your store and do some things. In fact, the way the order reads, unless you're one of those 19 businesses that must close their doors to the public, okay, you actually can keep your doors open, but there are 20 requirements, not suggestions, that you have to do. and you need to see it's attachment B under the governor's executive order. If you don't do these 20 things, then you're in violation of this order. But if people ask me all weekend and towards the end of the week, and I'm sure Director Grimes as well, why is such and such business open? It's not essential. Well, the governor's order allows non-essential businesses to remain open if they can comply with these 20 things and they can do basic things. Even if you're one of these, let's say a barber shop or a salon, doesn't mean you have to lock your doors and an employee can't walk in, but you can't see customers. You can't allow them in. Can't do that because those 19 business categories are shut down, specifically named in the executive order. But it doesn't mean if you're not one of those 19 that you can't do something if you can do all these things, which are really all the social distancing etiquettes that we're talking about, and reducing the number of employees and reducing the number of people you allow in your store at one time and do those kind of things. So again, if you have that question, take a look at what's got attachment B under the executive order, and then call the Georgia Department of Economic Development and say, hey, my store, my shop, my business is X. If I comply with these 20 things, is there a problem with me staying open? And I believe the answer is probably going to be no. It's not going to be a problem if you comply with those 20 things. But I don't want somebody who thinks they have to shut down if they have the ability to at least partially run their business right now. You know, and again, it's not my businesses that we're talking about, but if you can bring in 30% of income versus 100, I would still rather have 30% of my income coming in these tough times.
Very good. All right, Sheriff, are you concerned about the rise in gun sales as well as the rise in domestic violence during this crisis?
The rise in gun sales, no, not a bit. Bluntly put, I love the idea of good citizens who hopefully get some training, who, if they make that personal decision to arm themselves to protect themselves, as long as they're law-abiding and hopefully, again, get some training, I'm all for that. Domestic violence, yes, I'm concerned about. We are seeing a slight uptick. I was almost late for this conference because I was going to back up one of my own sergeants in a local neighborhood of a dispute between siblings living in a house. One lost a job and came back home, and got into a situation. There was some mental health involved in it as well. So we are seeing a slight uptick in domestics. We're seeing a reduction in crime. And that's look, we're all kind of inside with each other. And, you know, I sure love being home with you the first week, but maybe the second week it didn't work as well. And then we also have to be very concerned about abusers being in the home. Right. So an abuser, and I'm talking about a serial domestic violence person now, an abuser may only have so much access because kids are in school, the wife's working, those types of things. Well, if everybody's home right now, that lends itself to a really horrible potential of an increase in domestic violence. And so we're working really hard to do everything we can with our victim advocates, with Family Haven, our domestic violence shelter here, to make sure that we can get people in safe environments when we find out about what's going on.
Very good. Very good. Now, the next question I've heard from a lot of people, but under shelter in place, can we drive out of the state to pick up family members and bring them back to Georgia for in-home care? So I know a lot of people in their 40s and 50s who have elderly parents, you know, they might need to go support them, help them. What can they do during this period? As far as travel.
So the answer is yes. One of the essential functions is providing care, medical help, delivering medicine, doing those kind of things. So if you had an elderly patient or parent or loved one, family member, and you needed to provide care for them, then that would be considered essential travel. I mean, we need to be really careful of interacting with our elderly folks right now. I visited my parents 2 or 3 times in the last couple of weeks, but literally, you know, I'm a Southern boy. How hard is it not to hug your mama? But my mom is in an at-risk category, and I'm exposed to a lot of people, unfortunately, but because of my profession. And so I've intentionally chosen not to get close enough that I could endanger her. But if you have that situation where you need to bring a child home, you need to bring your elderly to stay with you, your parents, your grandparents, those kind of things, that would be considered essential travel and be allowable.
Right. Next question, Chris. A lot of us have been trying to gather data, watching the news channels and seeing all the statistics online. Is there anything that you can tell us about Forsyth County in general about, I guess we have over 70 cases now. Is there anything, any particular thing that links them together or anything that we should know as just living in our community, be aware of?
No, I mean, I think one thing, if you ever want to see daily, GEMA is posting a situational report to their social media accounts. You can go check that out. And I think what you're seeing is just a spread throughout the entire state. I think I think there's only about, I want to say less than 10 counties now in Georgia that are without a single case. So I think what you're seeing is just a continued spread. There are some counties in Georgia who have seen specific events that have triggered a spread there. South Georgia, we look at down the Albany area. If you followed this and followed that throughout the state, that was very hard hit. And so because of that, you've seen a pocket. But really what we're seeing is just what we call a wide community spread, on a widespread scale. And that's common to see in these type of events as we look at it. But like I said, one of the best tools out there is you can look daily at GEMA's website, and it tracks the counties, shows a picture of the state of Georgia, which counties have cases, and that's out there for the public. Anybody can see it.
Okay. Well, I think as citizens, we're all concerned about reports out of New York with healthcare workers, as well as the New York Police Department, and those people are all on the front lines of this and protecting all of us. And we're certainly hoping that it's not spreading rampantly throughout our first line responders, especially your department as well, Ron. And so I guess we're coming up on the 30-minute mark, and I'm going to ask a question that we receive from numerous people. What can we as citizens do to help both of you?
Stay home if you don't feel good. I mean, we're seeing some evidence now that asymptomatic carriers can pass virus, which is why the CDC just Friday came out and said about face masks being worn. So you're likely going to start seeing more face masks out. It's actually not as much for you to keep from catching it, but is from you. You may not even know you have it, and for you to spread it. And so that's one of the big reasons that came out. Also, if you need us, we are here. The sheriff will say it. We are here answering 911 calls. We are dispatching. But if you're not feeling good, let us know. If somebody in your house is not feeling good, has flu-like symptoms, anything like that, let us know. We're going to be asking those questions, but we want to make sure we're keeping our folks safe, that we can put on the proper what we call PPE, personal protective equipment, before we get there.
Right. And Sheriff?
Well, I think Chris said it. Look, I know it. Let's just be honest. It sucks. No one likes being told to stay home when you're an adult. But look, if we can keep each other safe by doing this for a little while, if we can help with doing that, exactly what Chris said, especially if you don't feel well. Look, this is not the time to go, I think it's just my allergies. I think it's just if you're not feeling well, seek medical advice, please. Testing is becoming more and more available. I was glad to see the rapid testing roll out this morning at Georgia Tech. I think it's CBS is doing that in conjunction with Georgia Tech. If you're not feeling well, stay home. Avoid these unnecessary things. If you don't have to do your yard this weekend and put mulch down, and you can stay out of Lowe's or Home Depot, no offense to those two organizations, just using those as examples because we all know them, do that. If you've got a leaking faucet and it's causing you trouble and you've got to get an emergency repair part, of course, go do that. But let's be smart about what we do. Let's avoid travel where we can. Let's make sure we're not taking the chance of exposing anyone any more than we are. using up those rare PPE materials that even we're struggling for in some respects. And we'll get through this together the way we always have, and the way we'll continue to work together and do those things. And I've got 2 people in quarantine right now. We've had other first responders in quarantine. I've had several tested. Thank God to this moment, we haven't had a positive test of a first responder in Forsyth County, but surrounding counties have. 23 law enforcement officers have now died as a result of complications of COVID-19 across the nation. My whole sister is on day 15 of getting over this, and thankfully is recovering with home care. So it's real. It's not going to get better until we do this, and there's going to be challenges beyond this and things like that. So take a deep breath, work with us, and please, if you own a business, it is hard to tell customers things that don't seem normal, like, hey, you're standing too close together, or hey, quit congregating. You gotta have the gumption on behalf of your customers, on behalf of your own business, on behalf of your own employees, to go have those friendly but weird conversations with people. That's how we're going to keep each other safe. So I implore you to do those things. The last thing I will tell you is, please, for goodness sake, don't spread information that's not verified. Oh my gosh, all of us have seen on social media, on emails, on all these things. It's related to this, it's related to that, it's a weapon of war, it's 5G, it's this, it's that. Look, let's try to spread factual information that keeps people safe, and vet that information before we spread falsehoods that go around. The faster we do that, I think the faster we get back to the Forsyth County way of life that we all love, and why we're here, and either run a business or live here.
Well, fantastic. We just had a plethora of more questions come in, but we're past our 30-minute mark, and you guys are both busy today. We're going to send you those questions in writing, and we'll post your answers when we receive them up on the togetherforfoco.com website, as well as the Together for FOCO Facebook page. And if people, the attendees, if you have not joined Together for FOCO Facebook page, please do so, and you'll get some great information. If you're an employer who is hiring, please let us know so that we can add your name to that list. Got a lot of people looking for work out there. And just want to thank both Sheriff and Director Grimes for being with us today. Recording of today's call will also be on the togetherforfoco.com site. And if your business or if you personally need assistance, please do not hesitate to contact the Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce. We will direct you or help you in any way you can. And with that, wash your hands and have a safe day at home with your families. Thank you all.
Thank you.